Welcome to Hardwood Focus. My name is Ailbhe Gerard. I'm a farmer and a member of the Limerick Tipperary Woodland Owners. This webinar is to explore markets for small diameter broadleaves. This is run by Teagasc in association with the Limerick Tipperary Woodland Owners and the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. I diversified my farm production to include organic lamb, tillage, honey, which I offer through HiveShare, ecotourism, including farm tours, as well as forestry. And forestry makes up a third of my farm area, and it's a very important part of my production. I established 10 hectares of broadleaves, including a native woodland on the farm. Biodiversity, recreation, and landscape were important reasons for my choice, but I also want this farmed woodland to produce extra income. As a woodland owner, I know that it will take our woodlands time to reach their full potential. And I know active management is key to ensuring quality, leading to profitability. My early thinning operations have provided me with firewood as a reliable market outlet for my small diameter broadleaves. Removing the poorer quality trees provided more growing space for the better quality trees. As larger hardwood logs are becoming available, I want to explore other opportunities in markets. This will allow hardwood growers like myself to add further value to my broadleaf woodland. That's why I'm really looking forward to this webinar. So now I'll hand you over to Nuala Ní Latharta, Head of Teagasc Forestry Development Department, who will chair this webinar. Thank you for watching, and we hope that you find this of interest to you.
Thank you for that, Ailbhe. And I think you'll agree that Ailbhe Gerard's story is a great example of farm diversification and farm forestry. It gives us an excellent insight into how forest management and income generation can go hand in hand in hardwood crops. You're very welcome to our webinar on exploring markets for small diameter hardwoods. This is a joint event between Teagasc, the Limerick Tipperary Woodland Owners Group, and the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. My name is Nuala Ní Latharta, and I'm head of the Teagasc Forestry Development Department, and I'm your host for this event. I'm joined here for the next hour or so by Jonathan Spazzi from Teagasc, he's a forestry advisor, Sean Garvey from GMIT in Letterfrack, and he's a lecturer there, and Dermot Doyne, who's manager in Whitney Sawmills. And Tom Houlihan, the Teagasc Forestry Specialist, will look after your questions today. We will have 3 short presentations followed by a Q&A session where you can submit your questions using Zoom's Q&A function. If you're on a laptop, this Q&A button is probably at the bottom center of your screen, while if you're on a laptop or on a smartphone, it's probably at the top of your screen. You can submit your questions at any time, and we'll get to as many of them as possible at a later stage. Now, please bear in mind that the focus of this webinar is on exploring markets for timber for young broadleaves and not on the management of young broadleaf woodlands. And also, just to let you know that the webinar is being recorded. So we go straight to our first presenter. Jonathan Spazzi is Teagasc Forestry Development Officer for Kerry and Limerick. Previously, he was a forestry consultant focusing on continuous cover management and agroforestry. He has a bachelor and a master's degree in forestry and is trained in forest mycology, environmental science and renewable energy technologies. He's a member of the Society of Irish Foresters and a committee member of Pro Silva Ireland. And Jonathan's talk today is on new broadleaf woodlands in Ireland and the Hardwood Focus initiative.
Well, thank you, Nuala, and welcome to all our viewers. And you should be able to see my screen at this point. So before I hand over to our industry speakers, just a few words from me in relation to broadleaf forest development in Ireland historically and from a management and use outlook. So in terms of broadleaf forest development historically, since the foundation of the state, Ireland has seen a fast forest expansion as a way to revert deforestation trends during past centuries. In fact, we went from 80% historic forest cover down to 1% forest cover at the beginning of the 1900s. But since then, forests in Ireland have rebounded fast, as the graph shows. In fact, for the period 1919 to 2015, Ireland has had the second fastest forest expansion rate in Europe, primarily driven by grant-aided private planting. Today, the forest cover stands at 11% of land surface, of which approximately 29% is made of broadleaf species. Now, we can see the ownership distribution of this broadleaf estate of 36% made of public ownership, primarily quilta, 43% in private non-grant-aided, and 21% in private grant-aided ownership. Now, this last portion is young, mostly planted on farm in the last 30 years, and is approximately divided between oak, ash, alder, sycamore, birch, and other minor species. In relation to ash, the spread of ash dieback in Ireland, as well as throughout the rest of Europe, has serious implications for the future of ash woodlands, and affected woodlands will require timely restructuring. And for this, the recent reconstitution and underplanting scheme funded by the Department of Agriculture provide options for owners. For today's webinar, we're going to look at possibilities to add value to small logs coming from ash restructurings, as well as thinning from oak, alder, sycamore, birch, and other species. So in terms of the production roadmap, we all know what a great biodiversity and ecosystem services resource broadleaf woodlands are. Perhaps less clear is their timber potential. The aim here is to achieve a sufficient number of straight quality sawlog trees of 40 to 60 centimeter in diameter, in many cases through an integrated management approach and with continuous cover forestry options. Here, active management is essential in order to select and promote the quality trees, the quality element from the thinning stage to the semi-mature and the mature stage. In terms of hardwood products, following planting and early maintenance, what we've seen so far is the production of firewood from early thinnings, supported also by the Woodland Improvement Scheme funded by the Department of Agriculture. And as woodland progress into subsequent thinning, opportunities for intermediate markets will arise. However, with the exception for ash hurley logs, such markets are generally not available, and these added value markets are essential for profitability going forward. So moving from woodlands to product, and as larger dimension logs become available, we already see around the country examples of new enterprises, often led by woodland owners themselves. And here are just a few examples. In County Meath, we see Sherlock Firewood business diversifying into craft timber, such as stairs construction or decorative trusses, hardwood trusses to complement spruce roof timbers. Or in County Leitrim, we find Lauderdale Furniture Company, a family-run business which turns timber from the family woodland into beautiful hardwood furniture, as you can see. And another example in County Cork, Mark Donnelly, forester and furniture maker, adding value to locally sourced hardwoods for bespoke furniture, outdoor garden structures, and interestingly, the supply of hardwood boards to secondary school students for woodworking projects. Also of note is the Hardwood Focus initiative, which I had the pleasure to facilitate in the last number of years. This is a discussion group started by Teagasc with Limerick Tipperary Woodland Owners Group and GMIT Letterfrack participation. And the project really aims to foster active management and explore intermediate markets from hardwood thinnings. From 2019, the Department of Agriculture has funded the initiative for a range of activities, a range of media productions, including supporting this webinar, a study tour to Wales and log testing with GMIT. And as a consequence of this activity, group member Jonathan Sykes has now invested in on-farm sawmilling equipment, and together with another member, John O'Connell, are now supplying logs to GMIT from second and third thinning for log testing. And Sean Garvey at GMIT will give us more details of this and of other Teagasc relevant research in his next presentation. I mentioned the study tour to Wales. This was aiming to for the group to meet development agencies and businesses involved in adding value to small diameter hardwoods, 20 to 40 centimeter logs. And the tour revealed a range of innovative products, such as, for example, the commercial production of end grain tile from small logs for use as flooring, hardwood composites from small logs again, and a new heat treatment for ash and sycamore for use as exterior cladding. The group also undertook specialist training at Whitney Sawmill on the Welsh border in hardwood milling skills, log grading, and continuous cover forest management. And here, of particular interest was the production of oak beams from small diameter, medium quality logs. And Dermot Doyne, manager of Whitney Sawmills, will give us more details in his presentation. So in conclusion, we see initial efforts towards active management and also the beginning of commercial activities towards adding value. The question remains, can this initiative be consolidated and scaled up to support the rural economy, to lock carbon for the long term into valuable products and into diverse and productive broadleaf woodlands? So thank you very much for your attention. And with this, I hand back to you, Nola.
Thank you for that, Jonathan. And I think it was a very thought-provoking presentation that introduces the event here. I'm sure that there'll be lots of questions for you later. So we go directly to our second presentation. Sean Garvey is a lecturer at Galway Mayo Institute of Technology in Letterfrack, County Galway. He's chair of the Manufacture, Furniture Making and Architectural Woodworking Programmes. He is currently co-supervising, along with Teagasc, a master's research project looking at the working properties and utilisation of small diameter Irish-grown alder. He has a keen interest in close-to-nature forestry and is the treasurer of Pro Silva Ireland. Sean's presentation today is on small diameter hardwood research and linking with hardwood users.
Thank you, Nuala, for that introduction, and good morning, everybody. So, who are GMIT Letterfrack? Well, we provide third-level education to students wanting to get into the furniture industry, and we also have a teacher education program. So we have about 210 full-time students, and in the photograph here we can see the original building in the centre that we use mainly for classrooms. On the right-hand side, then we have our new machine halls and lecture theatres. And I suppose that you can just see the 12 bends peeking up in the background, and in the foreground, out of the picture by about a couple of 100 metres, we have the Atlantic Ocean. So as you can see, we work in a very beautiful part of the country. Unfortunately, we don't have that many big trees, but we have lots of inspiration for creativity in the landscape, which is lovely. So on the industry side of things, the industry programs, our students come in on a common first year, and then by the end of the first year, they will choose the stream on which they want to study further. So we have three options there. We have the design program, the making program, and the digital program. And as I said, we have a teacher education program as well. So this is a shot of the inside of our machine hall, and as you can see, it hosts just here and just where the students are getting the demonstration, hosts some very high-tech machinery right up to CNC machines and beam saws, and we also have some laser equipment as well. So as you can see from this photo, I suppose our students are very creative, and these are some of the photos of their recent work. Some of the projects are made from homegrown Irish timber, and this one in particular, the lamp on the left there, was made from very small diameter willow, which is unusual. So our students, when they graduate, they leave with a very good reputation for innovation, creativity, and particularly quality. So we put a huge emphasis on quality in everything they do and we do, I suppose, as well. And they can boast 100% employment. So basically, anyone that graduates from GMIT Letterfrack, if they want a job, there's a job there for them, which is great. And the photo just shows some stack laminated native ash glued together and then just shaped afterwards. So I suppose we would know that 95% of the timber used in the furniture industry in Ireland is imported. And up to 2017, it was kind of the same in the college. We mirrored that in the college. But we managed to get that number down a bit. And it's close to about maybe 50% now. And that was due to processing, investment in processing equipment and working. And now we can work a good bit more with homegrown timber. According to the Department of Agriculture and Food, Ireland imported 42,000 cubic metres of sawn hardwood in 2018, and that had a value of 41.1 million. So I suppose the question I'm asking is, can we substitute some of those imports for homegrown timber? And then looking towards the future, we know that the growing stock of broadleaves is maturing, and therefore volumes are going to increase. We know that the firewood market is strong, which is great, but is there scope for alternative markets then to be sought for increasing tree sizes that will be coming on stream, and then the increasing volume of high quality, small diameter material as well? So most of the landowners listening, you'll probably know the value of your trees in your woodland, and you probably also know the value of firewood. But do we know the value of kiln dried furniture, furniture grade timber? And these are some of the prices we've paid recently for some of that imported wood that we bought into the college in the recent past. And you can see, I suppose, one of the lowest there would be beech at about 800, right up to white oak at almost 2,000 euro per cubic meter, and up to walnut then at almost 3,000 euro per cubic meter. So our journey into small diameter research then, it would have started with undergraduate major projects, and the photos on the left then are of a project where some testing took place to measure mechanical properties of that type of timber. And this particular project was actually a collaboration between ourselves, GMIT Letterfrack, and Jonathan Spazzi, our previous speaker, and also Alva Gerard, who we saw featured in the video earlier. And thank you to Alva, she put up the timber for the project from her own woodlands at home. So the photo on the right then is a prototype for another major project where a student worked on a craft whiskey with a craft whiskey producer. And as you can see, it's a well-made kind of high-end presentation piece, and it's actually made from low-value thinnings. So we're continuing our research development, and following from the undergraduate research, like in the previous slide there, we began to make further connections, and we're delighted now to be affiliated with Teagasc and have signed a memorandum of understanding with them, and we look forward to continuing to work together for the future of hardwood research and development. And then in 2016, Coford co-funded our sawmill, our mobile mill, our kiln and our drying shed. And that gave us the opportunity then to carry out research at a higher level and into this area. And educationally, it's been a huge addition to the college. So this leads us on then to a very exciting project that we're involved in, and we're undertaking at the moment, where Colin Marin, seen here in the picture, he's working on a Master's Walsh Fellowship funded by Teagasc. And his project is looking at the exploration of the working properties and utilization of small diameter Irish grown alder. And the co-supervisors for that project, again a collaboration between ourselves and Teagasc, and the co-supervisors are Dermot Doyne, he's the former head of campus here in Letterfrack, and Dr. Ian Short, who many of you will know, and he's a broadleaf forestry research officer with Teagasc, and then myself. And to date, Colin has carried out a huge amount of research, a huge amount of testing, I suppose, on the alder. I think he's carried out about almost 1,700 individual tests, and at the moment he's statistically analysing the results of those tests. So the project would have started this time last year, so it's very early days in his findings, but you know, his findings so far are shown are very positive regarding the strength, stability and machining properties, which is contrary to a lot of the generic research on juvenile wood. He's also looking into developing novel products and alternative markets for alder. And one of these possible markets then is to use Irish small diameter alder in woodwork classrooms within secondary schools. So I was interested to hear Jonathan talking about Mark Donnelly in Cork doing something similar. So, and that would be kind of substituting for imported poplar for students to practice their joint work on. And this slide then shows a beautiful cabinet made from some of Colin's alder. It machined really well, and it's achieved, as you can see, a kind of a very rich, lustrous finish. It's also very lightweight. Alder is quite lightweight, and that was a great advantage to this. As you can see, the cabinet was designed to be carried, so the lightweightness of it was really important. And it was made by Martin Carney, one of our technicians in the college here. So we've also collaborated, as Jonathan mentioned there, we've collaborated with the Hardwood Focus initiative. And at the moment, we're working on 2 projects together with them. So the first project involved the processing and basic testing of a number of logs. You can see them here being delivered in the photograph. And so far, we've milled all the logs and we've dried probably 2/3 of the logs. and have made some products and components out of the material as well. So there were, as I said, 8 logs arrived. They were of a range of quality, as you can kind of see there in the trailer. Most of them were about the 20 centimetre diameter, and this one then was a kind of an anomaly, a good bit bigger, about 35 centimetres in diameter. So a little bit of information about the logs. As I said, 8 logs, various species, 4 different species. The average about 3 metres long, and the mid-diameter then for those, as I said, averaged about 20, 21, 22 centimetres, with that log C being an anomaly at 35. And we can see the yield of 1-inch boards from them then averaged about 5 to 6, with the big one then averaging about 10 or yielding 10 boards. A little bit further information then, we would have to dry material down to about 10 to 12% for furniture. And as you can see, the initial moisture content then recorded was quite high at 40, about 40 actually. And that took 20 days in our kiln, so a little over 3 weeks in our kiln to dry. These photographs then, you can see we're looking at the processing of the logs that we saw in the trailer a few seconds ago, and you can see we made some products and components out of them as well. And the picture on the top right was just an experiment on machining a skirting or architrave from them. This particular architrave came from the bigger log, so the log that yielded 10 planks, but we were absolutely delighted with the result. As you can see from the photo, it machined really, really well. Just perfect finish off the machines, no tear out, no instability, no movement. We were very happy with it. And actually, interesting enough, we noticed very little difference in the machining of any of the logs really in comparison to mature wood. The big difference being maybe a little bit extra handling. Some of the logs obviously weren't of very, very high quality, so there was some defects in them, but a little bit extra in handling and prone to a small bit extra in cupping because of the extra crown boards. But other than that, machining, we were very happy with them. So some of these photos are showing some components that the students are going to make little dovetail boxes out of in a couple of weeks' time. And the second project then we worked on with the Hardwood Focus initiative, I'm calling it the Limerick Dresser Project. This is a very interesting partnership between the timber producer, Jonathan Sykes, and the local cabinet maker beside him there in Limerick. And as Jonathan Spazzi mentioned, he's after investing in some milling equipment. So Jonathan Sykes milled up the planks, and we just see him on the photograph on the left delivering them up to us. So we're kind of providing expertise on the drying, and we're going to actually dry the timber for him. So it came from a sweet chestnut tree about 26 years old, and we're in the process of drying that at the moment. And the finished product then is going to be a lovely dresser, as you can see sketched on the right hand photo, and that's based on a local Limerick design for a dresser. So that's a nice project. So I suppose we're talking about developing markets for broadleaves, and I think these types of collaborations, like Jonathan and his local cabinet maker, I think they could be really good for developing markets for broadleaves in Ireland. And this is another example of a successful partnership between Simon Doyle, who's a graduate of GMIT Letterfrack, and a fellow furniture designer, Adrian Cohen, and they got together to design this picnic installation for the OPW in the Phoenix Park. And one of the nice things about this project was that the oak that was used to make the seating and the installation, that actually came from the Phoenix Park. So it's a nice kind of circular project and collaboration as well there. So based on my own experience and GMIT's experience recently of using more and more native timber, and particularly small diameter, I think there's lots of opportunities there for using more and for raising the value and increasing the markets for small diameter, but just with the caveat that it needs to be of high quality. So the raw material, I suppose the trees, which is kind of based on active management and good quality management, but also the processing, the milling and the drying needs to be very, very of high quality as well, so that we're kind of building a good reputation for homegrown timber, and that we produce timber for, fit for purpose for the craftsperson or the musical instrument maker or the joiner or cabinet maker or that. So I think there's a need for leadership regarding training, and I'm probably including myself, maybe our GMIT, or even Teagasc there as well, so that we can avoid defects and train people. Like the photograph on the top right just shows some oak that was probably too aggressively dried, and when we got that timber, that's imported oak, but when we got that timber and we started cutting it up, you don't see any of these cracks from the outside. They're honeycomb splits, and it's not until you cut the board in half and you start trying to use it that you see the splits. And it's virtually firewood, really. It's not usable for furniture or for any kind of products like that. So it's really important that we put the time into, I think, developing the skills, and we end up with a very good reputation for Irish timber. So coming to the end of the presentation, so I think there's a lot of potential for the future, and it's been great to get the opportunity to address you all and to give you an insight into some of these innovative projects. I hope we'll see more Irish becoming available, and I'd be interested in something like a Grown in Ireland brand being developed soon as well. So thank you very much, and look forward to your questions later on. And if anyone would like to contact us for more information, you can see our email address there. So thanks very much.
Thank you for that, Sean. It's great to see the wonderful innovation and the collaborative research that's underway in Letterfrack already. And I can see a lot of questions coming in. Please remember, you can submit your questions to our presenters using the Q&A function on your screen, and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible after our presentations. Now, we're on to our third and final speaker, and who is Dermot Doyne. Dermot is the manager of Whitney Sawmills in Herefordshire, which is on the Welsh border. He is a trained and expert cabinet maker. He is now running operations at the mill, where he is making good use of his substantial experience as a customer of many sawmills and timber merchants over the years. Dermot's presentation is on commercial hardwood production in the UK, history and outlook.
Okay, well, thank you for that introduction, Nuala. Okay, brief history of the sawmill. The whole of the Whitney site, including 50 acres of ancient semi-natural woodland, was bought by Willie Buller back in 1989. Along with a narrow strip of old railway line and station, with the intention of replanting the woodland to a mix of native broadleaves. Willie had been involved in furniture and joinery for many years and wanted to improve the quality of his timber as well as the provenance of it. So he started his own sawmill on the railway line. Luckily for Willie, following the closure of many sawmills that had been supplying the now dying mining industry in the area, there was a lot of cheap kit. So he was able to take advantage of this. Plus, there was also the big storm of 1987, where there was a huge amount of wind-blown trees in the southeast of England. So his startup costs were relatively cheap. In 2008, conversations between Willie, the Duchy of Cornwall and Woodland Heritage led to what has become known as the Woodland Workshop course. This 3-day course, which covers everything from forest management and its ecosystem, getting value from the woodland and its timber, and how to get it to market, has played host to over 200 students from all sectors of the industry, including last year's trip that Jonathan Spazzi hosted with the Hardwood Focus group. Then in 2016, Willie retired, and Woodland Heritage bought the business, bringing their adage of grow trees, use wood into reality. So at Whitney, we run a 1500 wide Forester horizontal bandsaw, which is capable of taking a log of up to 11.5 meters long, plus a steno resaw for breaking the slabs down into smaller dimensions. Here you see a 250 by 200 box beam being cut, which is probably coming out of a tree of about 45 to 50 centimeters in diameter. In comparison, a 150 by 150 box beam will typically require a log of 30 diameter, depending on the sap and the straightness of that particular tree. On our site in Whitney, we mainly cut constructional timber from oak, Douglas fir and larch, including cladding, with the majority of planking for our joinery and furniture grade timbers being processed at a separate high production mill near Banbury, where there's also large capacity kilns for the final drying. So that's a typical parcel of oak that has been sourced from about 50 miles from the sawmill. All the oak and Douglas fir and larch logs that we process at the mill are from UK woodlands, And we're proud to offer Grown in Britain certification for all our fresh sawn timber and a good proportion of our air-dried and kiln-dried timber as well. Grown in Britain certification is a similar chain of custody scheme as FSC and PEFC, with an emphasis on UK stock, with the intention of promoting UK woodlands and its timber. This is just a selection of higher grade butts that we've taken off our beaming parcels over the course of the year. So we'll put those to one side, save them up for the winter months, and then plank them during the winter. Okay, so this is a parcel of Douglas fir that's also in the yard at the moment, which is a very cost-effective alternative to oak, and tends to be lovely straight uniform trees with very few issues to catch you out. Okay, so here you see a parcel of oak being delivered. Full load of logs on a big log lorry is usually about 24 tons, which equates roughly to about 23 cubic meters of oak, or 30 cubic meters of Douglas fir or larch. This is a pretty expensive form of haulage, so it's really important to always have full loads to maximize your costs. Okay, for smaller parcels of timber where you can't fill a log lorry, a mobile sawmill then comes into its own. These mills provide a much cheaper alternative to large static sawmills and can virtually convert the timber into planks where they have been felled. Once planked up, they can either be air dried at that site in collaboration with the woodland owner or transported back to a timber yard. The transport cost being a lot cheaper now you've removed all the waste and they've been squared into packs. This is a wood miser. This one is owned by a guy called Martin Fraser, who quite often helps us out for our woodland workshop courses. He spends part of his time running his hill farm with a flock of sheep, and part of his time travelling around sawing up logs for people. He's typical of many farmers in our part of the world looking for ways to diversify. So he now spends half his working life farming and then the other half contracting out the sawmill, either travelling to where the trees are or people bring small quantities of trees to his farm for him to convert them there. Okay, so this is an overview of a couple of sawing techniques without getting too bogged down into it. The first picture shows a box beam. It's the most stable form of beaming because it's basically straight out from the centre of the tree. And as previously mentioned, the 150 square beam is about as large a section as possible from a 30 diameter tree. The problem with oak from young trees is there can quite often be a large element of sap, which will further reduce the yield. So it can be quite restrictive from smaller diameter stock. With small dimension logs, really the best viable option is going to be through and through, like the second illustration. This will work for cladding in your lower grade logs or joinery grade and furniture grade timbers from your better quality logs. So just as a guide, in terms of how I deal with my planking, anything that's below 45 centimeters in diameter, I'm generally planking into 27 mil or thinner. It's possible to plank thicker material out of it, but the smaller diameter log and the thicker material, you tend to have a worse yield, as you can see from the top boards on this log. Plus, you get a higher percentage of crown boards, which are trickier to dry in timbers such as oak. Okay, so this chart gives some indication of the cost of timber in our market, as well as the sales value we're trying to achieve across the board. The expected stock value takes into account the different yields you would expect from different timbers and their grades. You'll see that the product with the worst returners are fresh sawn oak. This makes it very important to use as much of the timber as possible, such as converting all your falling boards into flooring or other similar products. Douglas is a much more consistent product in the log form, and sap is not viewed as a defect for constructional grade timber, unlike oak. So it gives a much more reliable return. The oak planking costs are in line with the cost of imported French oak. So we're selling to end users rather than timber merchants, focusing on service, quality, and grown in Britain badging. Okay, so now I'll give you an overview of some of the stock for some of our stocks of timber. Not a total list, but it gives you a view of the kind of markets we're selling into. The majority of our sales at Whitney is for oak and accounts for approximately 80% of our dry timber sales. Young trees are going to be very sappy and therefore suitable for smaller dimensions such as flooring or architraves and other such products. The market for flooring demands a character grade rather than a prime product, so you can use lower grade logs or falling boards from your beaming productions, so that all works to your advantage. You can see from the previous chart, we're working on less markup for fresh sawn timber, so this doesn't leave much margin for poor conversion rates or poor quality trees that have to be sold at lower rates. So buying the right logs at the right price is key. So the next slide is ash, which is another big seller, and I'm sure we'll have conversations about that and the issues with ash later on. It's always fell during the winter, but there is no discernible sap on ash. So from a maker's point of view, there's a lot less wastage compared to oak. It's immensely strong and lends itself to steam bending, hence it has been used extensively in chair making over the years. It also lends itself to thermal modifying, which is a new technique starting to come into the market, which turns it into a durable external timber. So it can be used for cladding and other such products, which also means you can use your lower grade timbers as well. This is a range of wooden handmade bikes that we're supplying ash to, and just proves its strength and flexibility as a product, and you can come out of small dimension stock as well. Okay, sycamore is another nice, stable and easily dried timber, and unlike ash, doesn't have any discernible sapwood, so your yields are good. Widely used in kitchens and chopping boards and worktops, as well as frontages and furniture. It's also a good substitute for American tulip for painted furniture because it's very fine grained and quite stable, which enables you to use your lower grades, discolored timber or grades with smaller knots, as that's not going to be an issue for painting. So you can use more of your tree. On rare occasions, you come across ripple sycamore, as in the bottom photograph, much prized for musical instruments. And these logs, the rippled logs, can command prices as high as €950 per cubic meter, compared to standard grey planking logs being about 120 to 360 euros per cubic meter. Also, like ash, it's being used and trialled for a thermally modified material as well, so it has more usage than previously. Alder's another good, easily dried timber, very stable, like sycamore, and again, no discernible sapwood. Historically used for cottage joinery as well as furniture, as its close grain and its ability to take a stain means it's a good substitute for or mimics mahogany. In the past, Whitney sold quite a lot to sauna makers because they love it for its not just its colour and its beauty, but its stability, and it's also got a very low thermal conductivity. Okay, and then brings us on to Douglas fir. Not a hardwood, but we treat it very much like a hardwood, and it's that and larch are the only two softwoods that we deal with. But the Douglas we dry as well and sell as planking. And pound for pound, it's the strongest homegrown softwood and a good cost-effective alternative to oak for constructional beams. The sapwood isn't viewed as a defect in constructional grade. And along with the fact that these trees tend to be reasonably straight, they produce a very good yield and a much better yield than oak. The youngest trees used commercially are 40 to 45 years, although most people wait till 50 to 55 years old. If you're prepared to wait longer and get some nice bigger butts, these can be used for planking and produce a very decorative joinery grade timber, which is easily dried as well. It's becoming much more in vogue and being specified as an interior finish more and more by architects and the like. If you choose the right butts, you can make a very good return for your product. I hope that's given you a small insight into our market and some food for thought. And with that, I'll hand you back to Nuala. Many thanks.
Thanks for that, Dermot. And it's encouraging to see that you're able to source an ongoing supply of UK-grown timber to feed the mill. Now we come to the Q&A section of this webinar, where you get to put your questions to our expert panel. So if our panel can switch on videos and sound, please. This is being handled by my colleague Tom Houlihan, who's been keeping an eye on your questions. Tom is the Teagasc forestry specialist and provides expert support on forestry issues and is an important link between forestry research and advice. He also leads the Teagasc forestry promotion campaign. Tom, have there been many questions coming in?
Yes, Nuala, we've had a range of very interesting questions, and following on from the 3 excellent presentations by our panelists. So I will get straight to the questions, and I will ask the panelists to keep the answers concise so that we can cover as wide a range of areas as possible. Maybe firstly to Dermot, there's quite a number of questions have come in about the topical issue at the moment, which is Shillara spreading in Ireland, and that there will be large volumes of small size ash becoming available, and questions around the use of this material apart from firewood, which we know there's a market there for. One question regarding 25-year-old ash by a participant. So would you be able to comment on maybe is there potential for these, and what is out there from your experience in Wales?
Yeah, well, so far, I mean, we're not using trees as young as 25, just because our stock tends to be more mature than yours. But so far, we're not seeing an issue with the butts, because as you know, the disease is starting up in the canopy. So the butt's going to be the last part that's going to be affected. If it's more advanced in the tree, then you're going to start getting honeydew fungus attacking it, at which point you're going to get staining, and then it's going to make it unusable. But so far, everything that we've used has been fine. Of course, the issue is going to be how long it lasts in terms of a crop.
Okay, thank you. To Jonathan, maybe another question. And you mentioned active management in your presentation. And can you expand more on what active management actually entails and how maybe it could be achieved?
Sure. Thanks, Tom. Active management is essential for profitable hardwood production. Is paramount to be able to develop vigorous quality trees within the woodland, and without any proactive management, those trees will just simply not develop, and the woodland will progress into producing mostly firewood, with the quality trees not having sufficient space to grow quickly to size, so they'll take very long time to mature. It is essential, therefore, to carry out early selective thinning, and this is in general recommended from when the trees in our woodlands are 8 meters high, and repeat every 4 to 6 years. The Woodland Improvement Scheme, funded by the Department of Agriculture, provides support to woodland owners for up to 3 thinnings, depending on options selected, and also very importantly to high prune those selected trees. This is just a selected few trees within the woodland, up to 6 meters, and as Dermot would know very well, the highest, a big percentage of the value of the future trees will be in the first few meters from the base. So in summary, active management is really taking ownership of the development process early on, and it is really a prerequisite to profitable hardwood production.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. And maybe to Sean, we got a question in here in terms of marketing small amounts of 40 centimeter diameter oak and beech trees that have been cut into planks. Do you see opportunities there for that sort of material, and maybe from your own experience in terms of wood use?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Yeah, I suppose, like as I mentioned there in the presentation, we've only kind of recently got into looking at smaller diameter material, and on that batch that came up from Limerick, there was beech and oak, I think you mentioned on it. So, you know, we didn't notice any real difference in the machining of it. So it machines very well. Obviously, the components need to be smaller. So I think if you've good quality stems coming, if they're a bit smaller, people can deal with them. Maybe big mills like maybe Dermot's or bigger, they want bigger material, but the smaller mobile millers can deal with that. And we can make beautiful products, as I showed some of them there, made from small diameter. So I think there's definitely scope for improvement. and particularly nowadays, locking that carbon up for longer than just firewood, I think. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Quite a few questions, maybe Dermot, coming in from your side, and just want to get to one or two. Just briefly, the minimum diameter and the volume required to make it commercially viable for a buyer when we're looking at broadleaves.
Well, as I mentioned in my presentation, that in terms of how we deal with parcels of timber, I'm looking for full loads on log lorries to make the transport viable. So that's 24 tons at a time. And that's where you've got smaller parcels, your mobile mills, if you're going to develop this network over an island, is going to help you. In terms of the size, the diameter, oak you are restricted in the material, because anything under 300 is going to be quite a young tree, and you're going to have more sap giving you a bit of an issue. The timber such as ash and sycamore that don't have a discernible sapwood, you can go smaller than 300. I tend not to buy it because of the way our mills work. But as Sean was saying, on your mobile sawmills, you can cut smaller and you'll get a reasonable yield out of them. Okay,
a couple of questions about drying. A participant asks, can oak and beech planks be dried successfully and linked, maybe comparing air drying and kiln drying? Would you comment on that, Dermot?
Can they be dried successfully? Yes,
yes.
You dry them successfully all the time. I mean, there's the whole drying way of drying stuff is a whole big subject in itself. But oak is what we kind of base everything, our techniques on, because it's the hardest to dry. So you've got to be sawing it in the winter. Because that initial drying period needs to be slowed down as much as possible, so you don't get the surface drying out too quickly and therefore getting surface checks. So I'm only planking oak between November through to February. Some thinner materials into March, but I won't go much beyond that. And it does depend on the temperature and the weather at that time. So that's it really, is keep that drying process as slow as possible initially. Okay. And also bear in mind your local environment, because the environments change from place to place in terms of how your size of sticks and how you dry stuff.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question here, where to go about setting up a mobile sawmill like that of Jonathan Sykes, which was in Limerick. Maybe Jonathan, could you comment on that?
Yeah, there's a number of suppliers in the country now importing mobile mills, but also small size bandsaw, quite affordable, a good price entry point. So there's a number available. There shouldn't be any problem for anybody to find them. There's a number of suppliers. I won't go into names here, but I don't think it's difficult to access it. There's quite a lot of different models and makes to suit every need. And I hear talking to a few of the owners that have invested in entry-level bandsaw. They're now very quickly moving up into more efficient models, or they find value can be got from processing even smaller logs into added value products. So it's probably an expanding market, the one supplying the machines.
Okay, thank you. And Sean, in your opinion, which of the Irish broadleaf species may have most commercial value or potential? That's a tricky one.
That's a good question. Which have the most potential? I think, well, I suppose Dermot covered a lot of them there in his presentation, and the merits of different species. The kind of dark horse for us would be alder, as I mentioned in the presentation. We haven't, like in my 20 years experience in working in letterfrack and using different timbers, I think this is the first time we've used it on this project. And, as I showed in the presentation, I think the results were very, very good from it. I'm really looking forward to using bigger material in alder as well. But I think it comes down to quality. If you have quality stems, I think there will be a market. It might be a niche market. I think Jonathan Spazzi there, was it on the Welsh tour? We were talking to some Welsh foresters, and they talked about getting £15,000 per cubic metre for Sorbus terminalis wild service tree. Obviously, they grow in small, very, very, they don't grow very big, and that's a niche. But I think if you have good quality stems, there will be a market for it. Like timber it's a good news story, it's not going away.
So I suppose the message is keep the management active and continuous, and aim for high quality.
Yeah.
And hopefully those markets will come along.
Definitely, yeah.
Dermot, just an interesting question: how to prepare oak thinnings to sell as stakes? And I presume we'd have to go going beyond the juvenile wood to look at stakes, or have you processed some of that?
No, I'm probably the wrong person to talk to about that. That's more of a forester's management question, okay. Really. We don't make a lot of fencing product because it's a lower grade stuff. So we're always trying to sell to a higher grade market for constructional beams and stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So maybe Jonathan, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think the issue with making stakes from oak, as Dermot referred to, is the sap. So you're really looking for the hardwood in the oak. So you need in excess, a larger log than you would from other species to make the same beam. We're probably not there yet, but we're starting to get there. You need at least, let's say, 4-inch, if not greater, of a hardwood to make a stake. So we don't have any experience yet, but it's certainly a possible added value market to watch out for, and it's something that we're actively considering, but we don't have any direct experience of that. I don't know if Sean, you have any experience?
Not of stakes, no stake material, no, sorry. No.
Okay, and a question, Jonathan, again, to meet the 43,000 cubic meters per annum, this equates to, a participant has suggested 1,000 to 1,500 cubic meters of first thinnings and beyond. And I suppose the question, is there adequate knowledge among growers to optimize the potential of their woodlands, and where might this be sought or achieved?
This is a key question. It's something that we keep going back to in our discussions, is the need of training and upskilling in management, in processing, in drying. So there is a work there to do. I must say, in Teagasc ourselves, we provide regional free and independent advice and training service. So for owners wanting to upskill and learn, the first part of call there, I would say contact your local friendly Teagasc forestry advisor. We also have a lot of resource and publication on our website. But also importantly, I would encourage owners to reach out to their neighbours, woodland owners, especially if they already actively manage the forest. That's definitely the best way to learn, and there's a lot of learning to be got there. And indeed, to the forest owner groups for mutual support and learning. Another important thing to say in terms of knowledge transfer is the knowledge transfer scheme funded by the Department of Agriculture. I would encourage owners to enroll in those and look out for those. They provide training on all aspects of forest management, including broadleaf management.
Okay. So one of the, I suppose, Sean here, one of the questions that has come out, and maybe it's very important in terms of the overall message of today, is that one of the objectives is to encourage consideration of future broadleaf markets. One participant has asked how woodland owners might network with institutions such as Galway Mayo Institute of Technology, or even locally or regionally based woodworkers. So would you be able to comment on that in terms of how maybe is there capacity to link in with yourselves?
There is, yeah. I suppose we run an open day in the college every year for our prospective students, but now and again we'd run other industry open days, and we were co-founders of the Irish Wood and Furniture Manufacturers Network, and we run podcast or webinars and conferences every year and that kind of thing, and maybe that might be an opportunity for those kind of organizations to get together, for the woodland owners and maybe the manufacturers to get together in a scenario like that, where, like at the moment, the furniture industry in Ireland has become a lot more professional in the last year, couple of decades, but we don't really have a brand for Irish furniture either, possibly in Ireland or abroad internationally. And I think there's probably a good opportunity there for growers and manufacturers to kind of come together and grow the industry, grow the made in Ireland and grown in Ireland as well. So I think it could be a good.
And as you've just said there, one of our participants has asked a question. Like, have we a Grown in Ireland type initiative? And if not, why not? Maybe that's a message for us all to take on board. Also, I suppose, looking at the future, would you see, Sean, again, is there a need for a coming together of all stakeholders to progress this future market development? Can you see a need for that?
Oh, definitely, yeah, definitely. And I think there's great opportunities there. Like, I would have started making connections with the forestry people, I suppose, over the last 5 to 10 years. And one thing I've kind of noticed, we had an open day in the college there where some came to see us, and maybe foresters they know the trees and landowners know the trees. They may not know what the timber looks like. And then with my colleagues on the other side, they know the timber and the properties, but they may not know much about the trees or where they come from. And it's probably the same with the manufacturers and the users. So I think it can only be good by all these stakeholders like architects, designers, makers, craftspeople, instrument makers, and those kind of craftspeople to get together, because like there's more and more of an appetite for locally grown. Even that example that I gave about, the possibility of getting alder into secondary schools. Like, wouldn't it be a great story where the secondary school is using local timber? The students are passing this woodland on the way to school on the bus. Thinnings are coming out, or larger stuff is coming out, and we're using it in our classroom. Like, how good would that be? So I think definitely partnerships with all the stakeholders would be great for both mutual benefit. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's a clear message coming out from today. Dermot, if we have time, how do you compete with imports of finished hardwoods from either Europe or from the US? Could you comment on that?
Yeah, I think we need to recognise that the US timber is a completely different market to us. When it comes over in shiploads, it's square edged, and it's a very different timber. Their American oak isn't a durable external timber, unlike the European oak. And their walnut and cherry is a very different animal to our cherry and walnut. So we should be focusing on the uniqueness of our timbers. Certainly ash, sycamore, and cherry, and the walnut in Britain has its own uniqueness. In terms of our oak, there's not much difference between what it looks like between our oak and the French, but our costs are not far off in line with the cost of European oak if I'm filling a 24 tons of oak onto a lorry. So we're sort of in touch with their cost base, which means then we're not selling to timber merchants who also can bring it in that form, but we can make margin on their timber as well as our timber. So it's a question of keeping in touch with it, really, and selling the uniqueness of the product that we do have.
Okay, thank you for that.
Tom, we might have time for another 2 or 3 questions, maybe.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Dermot, again, I'll just maybe a final question for you. In Ireland, we might be growing hardwoods faster than other European countries. Could you see this as being a disadvantage, or are there any issues about that, or in terms of our level of growth? Do we have quite strong growth due to our climate?
Yeah, well, you're going to have grain that has more growth rings to it, so it's going to be a more expansive looking timber. It's not going to be quite as stable, and certainly the oak, if you're being picky, you can tell British oak is a bit more, is more character than French oak. which you can sell as an advantage, because people do prefer it in some instances because of it is a little bit more characterful.
Okay, and I presume keeping the ring width of the oak uniform kind of helps as well in terms of stability, in terms of the type of management. Jonathan, maybe a question in terms of log testing. What is involved, and are you aware of where there might be training involved? A participant has asked.
I'm not aware of training as yet. We're engaged with the group in Limerick in initial log testing with Sean in GMIT. They're just early testing, primarily to see, as Sean was saying in his presentation, the performance of the logs in terms of stability going through the mill, being dried, and how would they apply. As Sean was saying, some of the literature refers to juvenile wood being difficult to process, but so far our experience is different. And from the testing done with Elva a few years back, and again this year, there seems to be opportunities there. So I think it's key that we do test our products. Also referring back to the branding, I think it's certainly be welcome. We've seen other agricultural enterprise moving to protect and promote their products through origin brands, and I think it'd be a welcome development. But an initiative like this we won't be effective without upskilling and developing of a network, and as Sean was saying, just make sure the quality is there throughout. So testing is what we need to do in the near future, and we're trying to make a start.
Okay, and maybe one final question to Sean to round it off. And I know that Teagasc has visited your facility in Letterfrack a number of times, and the great work that's being done. And maybe just would you outline where your graduates find employment afterwards? And I presume there's a very high success rate there.
Yeah, as I mentioned there in the presentation, we'd have 100%, pretty much 100% employment across the board, from the education program to the industry programs. The industry is quite broad, so a lot of our graduates from fourth year would go into, from the honours degree, would go into middle management in companies. So a lot of Irish furniture companies are contract manufacturing, so they'd be doing contract fit outs of hotels, bars, offices, that kind of thing. And our students might become project managers, CAD technicians, designers, product designers, bespoke joiners. There's lots of, I suppose it's broad, kitchen manufacturers, kitchen designers, yeah.
Okay, so Nuala, I'll hand back to you. I think our time is almost there. So thanks to all for their informative answers.
Thanks, Tom. We're now coming towards the end of this webinar, and before we finish, I'd like just to thank, first of all, Alva Gerard, who demonstrated to us that the management of broadleaves is key to moving up the value chain, and Jonathan Spazzi, who painted the picture of our broadleaf resource here in Ireland and provided us with the background to the Hardwood Focus initiative. Thanks also to Sean Garvey, who discussed some of the potential uses and markets for Irish-grown timber. And finally, thanks to Dermot Doyne, who explained the special expertise needed in the processing of broadleaves, and that for broadleaves to become valuable, in most cases, a minimum size of timber is necessary. Thanks to Limerick Tipperary Woodland Owners Group, our partners in this event, and also to the Forestry Division of DAFM, and also to my colleagues in Teagasc who made this happen today. Thanks to you, our valued audience, for watching. We nearly had 600 registered, and we had over 400 in at any one time during today, and I think that's a great achievement and shows great interest. And hopefully you enjoyed this webinar and found it useful. A recording will be available in the near future on our website. And if you want to make sure not to miss out on upcoming events and to keep up to date on forestry issues, please sign up to our e-newsletter. The link to do this is also on our website, which is teagasc.ie/forestry. We are working on more webinars, and if you have suggestions on any particular topic that you think may be useful, we're very, very happy to hear them. So until we meet again at upcoming events, both virtually and hopefully, when circumstances allow, face to face, thank you for watching, stay safe, and goodbye. Slán.